Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're gonna be building more on our blog app and also learning a lot of new and interesting stuff. So let's see what's on the plate today. Today we will be seeing a little more on routes and also an important concept called layout. And then we will be seeing how to create a new Rails app with other popular databases like MySQL and Oracle. You may ask me why should I switch from SQLite to MySQL when I am good with SQLite? The answer is when you are gonna put this app in production, that is gonna publish this app and ask users to use this app. At that time, you're gonna be storing a lot of data in your app. And as I said, SQLite stores those data in form of files, and files are completely inefficient while writing and reading a lot of data. So that's why you should try switching from SQLite to MySQL or Oracle when you are publishing your app. And then we will be seeing a small intro to something called models and IRB, which means interactive Ruby terminal. So let's get started. I have my app open and let's navigate to the welcome.html.erb page. Now if you see this page, you'd see this page is a complete HTML document, but this page does not have any kind of HTML tag, head tag, title tag or any body tag. But when we give a request to the Rails, it gives me back a complete HTML page. How? Let me go to the app and say /home. Now if I go and say view page source, you'd see I have a HTML tag which the doc type tag, and also I have a title tag saying blog, and then I have my content for the about page or home page. So how this magic happens? This happens through something called layouts. So what is layout? A layout is like a master page. This can be found in a folder called layouts in your views folder. If you go to the views folder, and then you will find a folder called layouts. In this layouts folder, you will find a file called application.html.erb. This file has those HTML tag which we saw in our view page source. It has the HTML tag, it also has the title tag saying blog. And the interesting thing is, you see here this yield inside the embedded Ruby tag. What does this do? This takes that welcome.html.erb page and replaces it here. That is, when I give a request for /home to Rails, it goes to the welcome.html.erb page, takes the whole content and goes to the layout page, and where you see this yield, it will be replaced by that content. So that's how you see this content embedded inside this tags which is predefined in this layout file. Now when I give the request for /about, you see the same head tag, title tag, and except the body is changed by the content in the about.html.erb. So that's the magic. What Rails does is whenever you're requesting for a file like welcome.html.erb, it goes to the layout file, it finds that small yield and replaces that yield with the content of the welcome or about page. So what's the use of this the application.html.erb or the layout file? So let me say a simple example. Suppose I want to write a navigation bar, and the navigation bar is gonna have links to all the pages in our application. So I'm gonna write a link for about page and also the home page in every page. So let me take the link for the home page and place it right here, and take this both link and place it also in the about page. So let me put a small horizontal line. After that, navigation bar. Now if I go back and reload the page, I'm gonna say home and about and navigation bar. I can go to about, I can go to home. However, this is a very bad practice. As I said, Rails believes in try or nothing but don't repeat yourself. But here you see we are repeating ourselves by writing these two links again and again in every page in our app. So this is not good. So how we get rid of it? So we get rid of it using the layout.html.erb. We take the code or the HTML tags which are repeated in every pages in our app, and place it in the layout.html.erb tag. So where do you want the content to be? If you want the content before the page or after the page, I want it to be in the start of the page, so I place it right here. So what happens, the layout is gonna have these two links, and finally it's gonna have this yield. What this yield is gonna go do is it's gonna go to the welcome.html.erb tag. It's gonna take this content and replace it in this yield portion. So I will have the navigation bar at the top and then followed by the page which I wanted. So now if I go to the about page and also get rid of this two links as it is, I don't want that, as I have placed in the layout file. If I reload, I'll still see the layout that home and about, and I can still navigate from home to about. So now if you see, I don't have those links in the welcome page or in the about page, but I have it in the layout file, and this layout file will be used for all the pages in the application, and I can place as much as link for all the pages in a single page and don't repeat myself. So that's the use of layout. Okay, with that said, let me go to something more on routes. So what's more on routes? So as I said, we are gonna place some routes in the routes.orb. Now if I want to have a quick look on what are the routes I have, you can do something like this. Head over to the terminal and type in this command rec space routes. So you might have already used the command like Rails new app. So what this rake means, rake is something like make. In C programming you would have heard about makefile. What makefile does, it takes bunch of C files, compiles it, links it together. Similarly in Rails, rake is nothing but some kind of make. What it does, it takes all the files and gives you some information about the files or compiles some kind of files. Now if I do rake space routes, what it does is it goes and fetches the routes.orb file and gives me information about what are the routes I have in my app. Now if you see, it has given information like what is the prefix, what does this prefix means. It's nothing but the variable which will be available in the views, that is home underscore path, and about is also available as about underscore path, so that is called the prefix. And what is verb? Verb is nothing but the HTTP action we do, whether we are doing a get request or a post request to this particular URL. And the URI pattern is nothing but the actual pattern you give in the browser, that is /home /about and something like that. And controller and action, which means we are doing the request to the home controller and the action is welcome. So that's what it means. Controller has action, as I said already. So home means controller and welcome means the action, and that's what it gives. So this will be useful in other situations which we will be discussing later in this application. So this is very important, rake space routes. Okay, with that said, let me go to the next section of our session, that is using databases other than SQLite. So how we do that? For that, for time being, let us create a new app so that I can show you an example for that. So let us go back a directory and create a new Rails app called, let me call this app as new app, something like that. The name is completely of your choice, new app. And before hitting enter, what you're gonna do is you're gonna give something like -d space MySQL. So what does this mean? We are telling Rails to create a new app by the name of new app, and also we are telling Rails to use the database MySQL rather than SQLite by using this option -d, which means -database, and we're gonna use MySQL for our database. So now hit enter. And now Rails will go ahead and create all files which we may need and then run bundle install. As we did yesterday, we're gonna break out of this when it's running bundle install and open that in our code editor. So let me go to new app. Let me close my code editor for our older app and open this new app in my code editor. And now if I jump to the app's gem file, the first change you would see is this one, MySQL 2. In the earlier app we had SQLite gem because we are using SQLite as our database. But now as I did -d space MySQL, I have told Rails that I'm gonna use MySQL, not SQLite. So what it did is, instead of installing the gem for SQLite, it's gonna install a gem for MySQL too. As we did yesterday, we're gonna remove the S from the HTTP to avoid some SSL certificate errors, and we're gonna also remove this coffee Rails because we're gonna not need it. And as we have did some changes to our gem file, we're gonna go ahead and run bundle install. And now this bundle install is gonna go to rubygems.org and fetch all gems and install it for our application. Now the gems have installed. Now what we need to do is we need to start our Rails server, and I'm gonna stop the Rails server for our older app and navigate to our new app and run Rails space S Rails server. Now with the Rails server running, let me go to the localhost colon 3000 and hit enter. Now most of you would see this here, something called access denied for user route. So why this here? As I said, we have switched from SQLite to MySQL. So what's the problem is, the first thing is you need to have installed MySQL in your computer. So you can use XAMPP or WAMP. I'm using XAMPP. First, you make sure that you have started your MySQL database, which I have already done. I have started the MySQL server. And then, as you may know, when you are using databases with applications, you need to provide the credential, that is the username and password. But we have not done that with Rails yet. So what we do? So for that, you have to go to the folder called config, which holds all the configurations needed by Rails. In this case, it can hold the configuration needed for our database. In that, you will find a file called database.yml. This file stores information about your database, like which database you're gonna be using, what's the name of the database, and what's the username and the password. So here you can see the default adapter is nothing but the database which I'm going to use MySQL, so it says MySQL 2, and then it says pool, which is the number of connection at a time it can have, and then it says username, root, and password, and the password for my database is pwd. Okay, so I have given the pwd password. Now if I go and reload the page, actually let me it's still saying that I have not specified the password, but I have given the password. Okay, what you have to do is, once you have did that, you have to go ahead, stop your server and reload it, because it needs to reload all the configuration files. So let me reload the page, reload the server, and once that has started, now it's gonna say a different error. It says no database error. So the problem is, we have successfully connected to our MySQL, but there is no database in my MySQL server saying new app underscore development. So I need a database by this name in my MySQL server. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna go to phpMyAdmin, which is a kind of interface to MySQL. You can use MySQL Workbench and whatever you're comfortable with, but I'm using phpMyAdmin. Okay. Now I need to go to new and give the new database name. Okay, we create that, and once that's done, if I reload the page, I would see welcome aboard, you're writing Ruby on Rails. So which means you are successfully connected to MySQL and the database also chosen. So that's how you create a new app in Rails which uses other databases like MySQL and Oracle. If you want to use Oracle, there's nothing difficult. You have to use the gem for Oracle instead of MySQL. So that's the concept. If you're going to use SQLite, you need to use SQLite gem. If you're using MySQL, you need to use MySQL gem. And if you want to use Oracle, you need to use the Oracle gem. And in the command line, if you specify -d MySQL, Rails gonna figure out what's the gem you need to use for MySQL, and if you give -d Oracle, then Rails will figure out what's the gem to be used for Oracle connection. So that's it. So next thing what we're gonna see today is another important concept, which is also connected to database. What is that? It's called something called migration. So what is a migration? So now if I go to my database, new app development, it says no table found in the database. At some point of time, I want to add a table to this database so I can store data, and I may want to add a column to a table at some point of time. So you should not, in Rails, what you should not do is you should not go to the database and type in the table name, create the table you want. That's a bad practice. You should leave all the database operations to Rails. So these database operations are handled in Rails through something called migrations. So it's Rails responsibility to create a table in the database whenever you need through something called migration. So suppose now I want to create a table called student in this database, so I want to store some information about the student. So for that, what we need to do is go to the terminal, and now what I need to do is type Rails generate. And another important trick is, rather than typing Rails space generate all the time, you can simply type Rails-G, which is a shorthand representation of Rails generate. So Rails-G, and this time I'm gonna generate something called migration. Last time we generated a controller which generated the necessary files for a controller, and this time this is gonna generate a necessary file to create a migration in Rails. And the name of the migration is, I'm gonna say create table students. So as I said, in Rails, table names should be of plural form. Suppose if I'm going to create a table which is going to store information about students, I should name the tables as students, not student. So I'm going to hit enter. Now it's going to create a migrations necessary for creating a table in our database. Now if you see, this command has created a new file in the folder db/migrate. So now if I head back to my app, and in the db folder I would see a folder called migrate. Inside that I would find a file which is something of a weird name, and it has created a migration something like this. It says the class, it has a class, it says create table students, and it's inheriting from something called active record called migrations. So this is a class which is defined in Rails. There's no need for you to worry about it. And then it has also created a function for me. It says def change create table table students do something like that. And let me give you a quick overview of what does this. So this def change method is gonna be called whenever I'm gonna apply this change to my database. So this method will be called in this file when I'm making a change to the database. And what's the change? It's gonna create a table. The table name is table underscore students. Okay, so I would like to call it simply as students. Okay, so create tables students, and it has a block saying do t. So what does this mean? This is nothing but this create table is a method, and it takes the first argument as students, and this method is gonna return you a variable which is called t. You can even call this as table, nothing wrong in it. What it does, this method takes an argument for the name of the table, and then it returns an value which is a table. This is actually an object which has many inbuilt method in it. Okay, so let me tell you again. This create table takes this argument, that is students, as argument, and then it returns a object like t with many inbuilt method in it. One of the inbuilt method is t.string, which means I'm gonna create a column to this table of type string, and I'm gonna have it as name, and then I'm going to add another column to the table of type integer. So what I say, t.integer space, and it's gonna be of age. So what does this mean? It calls a method string in this object t, and it takes the argument, and this argument is what the name of the column. And this also has a method like t.integer, and it takes the argument what is the name of the column. So the thumb rule is This def change method is going to be called whenever I am applying this change to the database, and I am calling a method inside this change method called create table, and it's going to create a table, and the name of the table is student. And this method is going to return me an object called t, which creates column for the tables, and the first column I'm going to create is name, and the type is string. So these types are inbuilt method into this object t. So whenever I'm calling these methods, I provide the argument what's the name of the column. The name of the column is name, and the data type is nothing but the method we called, which is string. And this also has a column for age of the student, which is integer. So that's what it means. Okay, now what I do is, now a little bit more change, what you can do is, rather than keeping the name of this method as change, you can change it from it to up, and you can also define another method called def space down. So what does this mean? It means whenever I am applying this change to the database, the up method will be called. Whenever I am going to remove this change from the database, this down method is going to be called. So when I am removing the change, what will be the change removed? I will be deleting this table, I will be dropping this table. The method for this is nothing but drop table. So in a clear-cut manner to say that whenever you are applying this change to the database, this up method will be called, and the table will be created with two fields. Whenever you are removing this change from the database, a table will be dropped, and the table name is students. So these are called migrations. As you may think, migration is nothing but changing from one state to another. You can apply this change to the database and take it from one state to another, and you can remove the same change from the database and take it back to the old state. So these are called database migrations. Now what you will be thinking is, how do I apply this change to the database? I am okay with how I can create tables, I can drop tables, but how I apply this change to the database? This can be done using the terminal again, using this simple command called rake space db migrate. So what does this mean? As I said, rake is something similar to make. Here we say take the file in the migrate folder, that is this migrate folder, and compile all those files and apply the change to the database. That's called db migrates, which is nothing but db migrations. Now if I hit enter, what it does, it goes to the migrate folder, takes all the files in the migrate folder, and calls the up method. As we said, we are applying the change, so it will be calling the up method. In the up method, we will be calling the create table method, which creates the table students, and we will be having two columns, string and integer, of type string and integer, and the name of the column is going to be name and age. So now if I go and see in the terminal, I would see, now you see I have created the students migrating, and the table is created using the method create table, and the migration is done. So now if I go to the database and click structures, you would see two tables. One is called schema migrations, which is created by the Rails for managing this database, so you should not be touching this table. But you would see there is another table created by Rails called students, which we wanted. Now there is no data in the table, but if you go to structures, you would see we had the name, we have the name column which is of varchar, and we also have an age column which is of type int. So now these things are created by Rails and not by us. But you can see another weird thing, it's also added a id column which is primary key. But if you see, I have not specified id column called id. But why it's getting added? It's a Rails convention. As I said, Rails has convention over configuration. When you are creating a table, Rails assumes that the primary key of the table is going to be id, and it's going to be of type int. So this is an assumption made by Rails. So this is the convention that Rails follows. Whenever you are creating a table, the default primary key will be of type integer and will be called id. So remember that. So there's no need for you to specify any primary key in this file. It will be taken automatically by Rails as id of type int. So that's it. Now the next thing is, as I said, you have applied this change to the database. Okay, tomorrow you may feel, I don't want this change, I don't want this table student in my database. So you should not go to the database, go to the database and drop the table. It's a bad practice. You should not be doing it. It should be done by Rails. So how we do? We're gonna take back the database from that state back to the old state. So this also a migration. So how we apply this migration? Here, as you see, this file name is little bit weird. It has a big number followed by the name which I gave, create table students. So what this big number is? This big number is nothing but a unique identifier which is created by Rails, which is based on the time which you created this file. So now if I go and copy that unique identifier, I need to copy this unique identifier. This unique identifier represents this particular migration. I want to take back this particular migration. So what we do is go to the console, type in again rake space db migrate, but this time I'm not gonna apply any changes. I'm gonna reverse the change. So what I do is migrate down, and I gave version equals 2017-06, which represents the migration which I applied. So what it does, it's gonna take down the migration, it's gonna remove the migration from the database. So now if I hit enter, it's gonna go ahead and call the down method, which is in this migration. It's gonna call this method as I am gonna remove the migration, and the which migration is to be removed is taken from the unique identifier which the file has. Now what is done, it has called a method called drop table, which I have specified there. Now if I go to the database and click on structures again, you won't see the students table anymore. So that's it. You are removed the table from the database by removing the migration. That is, you are taking the migration down. So the stuff is, if you're gonna call rake db migrate, it's gonna apply all the changes in the table, in the all the changes to the database. If you're gonna call rake space db migrate down, followed by providing a version which is the unique identifier which is appended to the starting of every migration files, Rails gonna remove this migration by calling the down method. So in the down method, you need to have the function called drop table, which will remove the table from the database. So that's the key concept. Now that's okay. I want to take my database back to the back with every table I want. So I go ahead and I apply the migration. Okay, now that's done. If I go to structures, I would see the students table again, but now at the future point of time, I'll go and see the student table, and in the structure I feel I need to have another column for the roll number. So at this point of time, you should not go and add a column in the database. It should be done by Rails. So how we do that? This is again done through migrations. So now I'm gonna take the database from one state to the another state, but here I am not removing any change, but I'm applying a new change to an existing table. So for that, I'm gonna create a new migration now. So for that, we got to generate another migration, and I'm gonna say add roll number to what table? I'm gonna add roll number to students. So I'm creating a new migration, and this migration is for adding a new column to the existing table. Suppose if you want to add a brand new table, like I want to add a table for staffs, for storing the details of staff, what you do, you again go ahead, create a new migration saying create table staffs. So now I'm just adding a column. So what I have done is it has created a new file in the db/migrate, and this file is right over here, and this has a method by default calling def change. Now I want this to be def up, def down. I have two methods. So def up is gonna be called whenever this migration is applied, and this down is gonna be called whenever this migration is rolled back. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a column. So I'm gonna call a method called add column. There we called a method called create table, which created a table. Now we are calling a method called add column, which is gonna add a column. Okay, now we're gonna add a column. This in this method you have to say the first argument as to which table am I adding the column. I'm gonna add it to the students table, and then the next is I'm gonna give what is the name of the column. I want it to be roll number. And what's the type? It's gonna be integer. So that's how. First argument is the name of the table to which the column is to be added, and the next thing is I want to remove the name of the column and actually the type of the column, which is integer. And in the drop column I have to do the reverse. If I'm adding a column, I have to remove the column. Similarly we did in the previous migration. We created a table, then we dropped a table. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this, a small change in the method. Rather than calling add column, I'm gonna be calling remove column. So this is what gonna remove the column from the table students, and the column to be removed is roll number. So first argument is the name of the table and the column which is to be removed. So if I save it, and now if I go ahead and type the rake db migrate, it's gonna take all the migration files in the migrate folder, compile it, and apply the change to the database. Now the change is I'm adding a column to the existing table called students table. Okay, now that is done. Now if I go ahead and go to the structures again, I would see a column called roll number is added and it's of type int. So now you see we have three stages. The stage where we had nothing in the database, then we created a table called students, and the third stage which is nothing but adding a column to the roll number. So these are three separate migrations. That is the initial stage where there was no table in the database, then we applied a migration which created a new table called students, and at some point of time I added a new column to the table by creating another new migration. These are called migrations in Rails. Suppose in the future I feel no, I don't want a column called roll number in my table. So what you do, you should not go to the database again and drop the table. It should be done in Rails. So how we do, we go to the migrate folder, copy the unique identifier of the file, that is this unique identifier, and go to the console again, and previously we removed the migration of version 2070 something like that. Now I'm removing the version which I did at the before by adding that the column. Okay, now if I run the migrate column down, it's gonna remove the column from the table. The previous migration applied it, now we are removing it. So that's done. Now if I go to structures, you see no more roll number. So this is how you do changes to the database through migrations in Rails. Okay, so now as you see we had three stages, we had three migrations, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so now at some point of time I want to take it to the first stage. At the beginning there was no table at the beginning, I want to take it to that stage. What we do, we again do the same. Instead of saying db migrate down, I just say rake db migrate version is equal 0. So this is what this means, that we are not doing something, we are applying the migration with up to this particular version. Suppose if I had two migrations, I'm gonna apply the migration up to this. If I give this unique identifier, if I give this unique identifier, it's gonna be applied up to this. If I give 0, it's gonna be taken to the first migration where there were no tables. Okay, if I give version equals 0, then what Rails does is it goes to the migrate folder, it's going to search for any file with version 0, but there are no version 0. What by default is that Rails takes it as the starting point, the initial point where there were no tables. Now if I go to to the database, I would see no tables. Okay, now the next thing, I'm gonna ask Rails to run the files in the migrate folder only up to this particular version, only up to this particular version, and not this up to this version. So how we do that is we say db migrate, in the version I give this. So what does this mean is, go to the migrate folder and run the migration only up to this particular version. If I have any migrations above the, before this version, run that also, but if there is anything after this, don't run them. Okay, if I run this, what it does, it is gonna only create the table students and does not add any column to the students table. But if I blindly run rake db migrate, it's gonna also create the students table and also add the column roll number to the table. Now if I go to the students, I would see there is no roll number added. Now instead of that, if I go ahead and run db migrate, simply it will go ahead, find all the files in the migrate folder and run all the migrations. So if you give colon down and a version, it will remove only the migration in that particular version. But if you give db colon migrate space a particular version, then it will run all the migrations up to that version. So this is the whole thing, whole thing in Rails called migrations. So using migrations, you can add a table to the database, add a column to a table, and manipulate the table in Rails rather than you going barehanded and manipulating the tables in the database. So that's what Rails is all about. So I hope today we have taken a little more longer for discussing layouts, routes, and then migrations. So let's keep the model introduction to model in the next session, so that this has crossed almost 30 minutes now. So let's end it today. Hope you have learned something new and interesting today. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the like button and also try to subscribe. Thank you.